Thank you for watching this video from the Canada-Europe Transatlantic Dialogue at Carleton University. This event is sponsored by the Canada-Europe Transatlantic Dialogue, CETD, and the Faculty of Public Affairs Research Month at Carleton University. CETD receives funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The views expressed in this video are solely those of the presenter and do not reflect the views of the CETD, SSHRC, or Carleton University.
I want to talk about voting turnout. I think it's appropriate to do that in the context of this project. I've been interested in the question for a long time, even before the voting decline started, of who votes and who doesn't, and what's the reason for that behavior. We'll be looking at this today from the point of view of Canada and Europe, as is the mandate of this conference. So I want to do some, give you some findings today and engage in some speculations. And because we're dealing with quite a few countries here, and because the patterns are not exactly the same in each case over the last 20, 25 years, I could give you kind of a wishy-washy answer to my question, is voting turnout still declining? But given things, I don't think I will. I think I'll give you that answer. Need I say more? Okay. Excuse me. I looked at 31 European countries plus Canada. I omitted the compulsory voting countries, and I included quite a number of countries from the broader Europe, Russia, for example, Turkey, Ukraine. So I've got a fair sample of countries. Over the last 20 years, what I did was take the most recent parliamentary election in each case and subtract it from the election closest to 1995. So the decline over 20 years on those 32 countries, 26 of those 32 countries declined with an average decline of almost 10%. 2 were unchanged and 4 increased, an average increase of rather small of 3.6. Over the last 10 years, 18 of 32 declined. So this was most recent election minus the one closest to 2005. The average decline was about 7%. 14 of the 32 increased with the average increase of 3.3. Now that figure, the 14 figure, it's a little bit misleading, because there were some small increases in high turnout countries, like the Scandinavian countries and Turkey. Excuse me. And there were some upturns in countries with long-term declines, such as Canada, UK, Slovakia, and a country that for a long time was considered to be a prime example of low turnout, Poland. Reasons for the turnout decline. Well, this is a slide I'm just putting up there for the sake of illustrating that there has been a lot of research on the question of why people are voting less. I've chosen for today not to go into these things, but rather to go in another direction. But there is considerable research in various places on the reasons for this. There are 4 big reasons: youth disengagement, changing nature of civic duty, rising public cynicism, and the perceived lack of meaningful choice in the party system and the candidates. And there are other reasons for non-voting. But instead of dwelling on the negative, what I decided to do was look for instances in the last 20 years among those countries where turnout has increased. And this is the situation. I chose rather arbitrarily the baseline of 5% increases from one election to another. And these are the instances over the period from 1995 to the present where there have been turnout increases over 5%. And I wanted to see whether we can learn anything from these cases. I don't think I need to run through them. I would mention that you see Spain on this list twice, and that's kind of illustrative of the situation in many places. Spain increased from 2000 to 2004 from 68, 69% to 76, but then it went back down again to 68, 69, whereupon in 2015 it rose again to 73. So that's why they are there. So these are the cases, and of course we have the Canadian 2011, 2015 case here as well. So what happened in these cases of turnout rises of 5%? Was there a change of government? For the most part, the answer is yes. There was a change of government in quite a number of these cases. The current Spanish situation, to my knowledge, is still unclear, although I gather there's a caretaker prime minister and the potential new election on the horizon. So I'm not sure whether that's has happened or not. But in any case, in Hungary, and then what I did is try to look at the political atmosphere in the cases of those elections. In Hungary, there was a polarization and a very heated campaign. The Spanish election of 2004, there were the Madrid bombings, the attempted accusation of ETA, and a lot of public interest. In Czechia, scandal and deadlock. In Ireland, where there wasn't a change of government, in 2007, there was a major gain by the opposition. The government, although it did continue, had to go into a coalition, and there was a lot of uncertainty about the outcome of that election. I've put Russia on this list as partial because this was the period where the accession of Medvedev to the presidency was on the horizon. Putin was heading the list for prime minister, and it was expected that he would drop back to that position, and there was some potential expectation there would be a change of regime of some sort, uncertain. So I said partial. In Turkey, there wasn't, but this was the case of a major deadlock-breaking election resulting from the previous presidential election situation. In Poland, this was early elections, close elections, polarized, dominated by corruption accusations. In Bulgaria, a newly formed party won. In Canada, we know, a close election, a lot of mobilization, strategic voting decisions necessary. In Spain, two new parties enter the mix, and a kind of fragmentation of the party system. That was my judgment of the atmosphere at the time those cases took place. So what happened after? In Hungary, turnout declined slowly. In Spain, it declined. In Czech, it declined. In Ireland, it rose slightly. In Turkey, it rose. Turkey's a high turnout country. In Poland, it declined. In Bulgaria, it declined. And, of course, we don't know about the other two. So many of those turnout rises were not sustained. They were single event related. I also looked at, I don't really have time to talk about this much, at a number of smaller turnout increases of 2% in those countries. And in 7 of the 12 instances there was a change of government. And in 4 of the instances, there was a focus on either newly emerging far-right parties during those elections or, in the case of Austria, a crisis of fragmentation within one of the far-right parties. So my conclusion is that looking at turnout increases the widespread desire for political change is the common factor leading to the turnout increases. That desire creates short-term interest, mobilization, uncertainty, need for strategy, all things that will engage people on a short-term basis. So that's what the turnout increases have looked like. An interesting conclusion also is that economic uncertainty is not related directly to turnout. This is a point that Larry and I have worked on previously in work done with the cluster organization. And at least in terms of the 2008 financial crisis or later, those events did not directly lead to turnout increases. There may have been these economic conditions leading to some indirect effects if they led to increased government unpopularity or the rise of right-wing parties, but they weren't directly connected to fears about the financial system. And then, as I've already pointed out, often these turnout rises are not sustained, and turnout goes back to the general picture. So I'd like to close with a number of implications for this, that, and these are only my personal opinions, as what this might mean in a number of contexts. What implications does it have for election campaigns, particularly for opposition parties that desire to raise turnout in order to take advantage of this? What it means, I think, is that the tone of the campaign becomes all important, the way it's structured. And that tone becomes around the need for change. If you think you've heard campaigns around we need real change, sustained change, policy change, let's have a change, this is only the beginning. Need for change is going to be the key theme of all opposition campaigns and possibly government campaigns too, because that's what might lead to an influx of new voters, which might bring about victory. An increase in negative campaigning in order to provide differences and to buttress the need for change. Professionalization of party operations, absolutely essential in order to create the campaigns that will sustain the change theme. And there's a need for mobilization of potential new voters or transient voters in an electoral situation. But given the state of political parties these days, political parties are find it very difficult to do the kind of mobilization that they maybe could do at one point. And therefore, a lot of this mobilization is now at least attempted by social media, through social media. I'm not a big fan of emphasizing social media effects on elections, but this is one area in which I think there is a lot to say about what the parties are trying to do and the way they're trying to do it. And finally, in incumbents, if they desire to maintain positions, need, if they want to be successful, to style themselves as change agents, even when they're not. I mean, we saw what happened in the 2015 Canadian election when the incumbents did not. They were for the status quo. Well, that doesn't work when there's a mood for change. You need to be a change agent too. I also think this has a number of implications for political education, a neglected field and one that I think requires considerable attention, particularly in a world of declining voter turnout. The messages that political education needs to provide, if it's going to work to increase participation, is to emphasize the instrumental nature of the vote, not the expressive nature of the vote. It does no good telling people they should vote. They should vote. You should vote. It's good for you. Or you should vote because we value our democracy. The message that needs to come forward is you need to vote because your vote is an instrument of change. Your vote will achieve something and you can make a specific change that you want. That will engage people and that will engage particularly young people. This fits perfectly with the literature on changes in civic duty, which I won't be going into right now. There's therefore a challenge to connect events to domestic or EU political realities. Another interesting implication is that political education is more difficult. It's more difficult to teach. We look to schools to teach political education, civics courses, things like this. We know that those kinds of educational enterprises don't want to emphasize partisanship, political realities, current politics. They want to get into more long-standing things. Let's look at the Constitution. Let's do stuff like this. If you want to engage young people, political education and civics courses are going to have to deal with political realities. And teachers, we know, are very reluctant to get into that. But that's one of the reasons why civics courses have such a limited range of success. There are, therefore, if the schools aren't going to be able to do it very well, more opportunities for groups and institutions to engage in political educational messages. There is, I think, another implication that this constant change theme will simply encourage cynicism, because as we know, it's one thing to promise change all over the place, but when change is not forthcoming in the same way or to the same extent, people get cynical and turn away from the situation. So it could encourage cynicism. And the last point I'd make, that particularly related to that one, is that political education needs to emphasize, therefore, the constraints that exist on politicians in being able to accomplish the kinds of promises and change and policy changes that are proposed in the change messages. There needs to be an understanding of this. Maybe that's something that could be taught. Thank you very much. I'm sorry you had to put up with a